Imagine talking to a person with a bright smile, but not even guessing that the person has lost every hope in life and is at the cusp of finishing himself or herself. You wonder after the news whether you could have helped or not. I believe we all can, only with a bit of awareness and responsibility. Greetings from Commondove. Today we have with us Ms. Tamanna Edwards, a counseling psychologist, leading program designer and innovation at Mindpiper. Along with her, Ms. Agrima Chatterjee, a counseling psychologist who extends therapy to individuals by offering them a safe space for reflection and growth. Mindpiper is a value-based mental health organization with the mission to build a social movement to end mental health inequity by advocating and providing contextualized quality and compassionate care. I would like both of our lady guests to say how are they feeling today.
Thank you for having us, Arjun. Looking forward to how we make
Yes,
meaning of and speak about mental health.
I think likewise, feeling quite great and excited to see how this conversation unfolds.
I believe it will be very good for everyone. So, moving on, let's begin the session. At first, I would like to acknowledge the fact that mental health concerns have always been deprived of the importance they actually deserve. The reason have sometimes been our own casual approach towards it or not even being able to identify the real problem. So, in your opinion, what other barriers exist towards seeking mental health support, and how are you guys at Mindpiper tending to it?
Thank you for that question, Arjun. I think it's a very pertinent question, and there are two layers to this question. So perhaps I can start with the first one, and then also bit by bit look at what we're doing at Mindpiper to navigate around these barriers. I think our perception of mental health and support around mental health concerns is deeply rooted in societal ideologies. And while there might be quite diverse number of barriers that may exist, perhaps I can highlight a couple today. For instance, one barrier that we see quite a lot and perhaps speak about is stigma. There is an underlying thought that is almost a reflex now that crops up when we think about reaching out for support or even to the extent of approaching a mental health professional. When people set out for therapy or reach out for this support to simply understand what they are going through, they're riddled with many questions. Some initial questions could be, who do I reach out to? Is this individual, is this organization credible? Has anyone I know seen them too? Will they be able to help me? Will they understand me? And these are questions that everybody has a right to think of, but these are also based in how am I going to receive the support that I want to receive, right? It's attached to a stigma that we might have over time built in the society. The way that we at Mindpiper maneuver in this context is building trust, because trust is the foundation of any relationship, specifically a therapeutic alliance that you might be building. Building a personal connect, being transparent about the process, that's what's important. It's important for them to know what they are in for, who the professionals are, connecting them with it, instead of just having a hierarchical approach or saying that, okay, I'm here and I'm an expert and you have to come to me and perhaps things are going to be solved. It's more about how do you collaborate, how do you support, and how do you be transparent in this process. And that's what we do at Mindpiper. I think another challenge or barrier is perhaps the way we perceive mental health itself. If I can think of, it's often associated with a lot of words, like weakness, not strong enough, the inability to handle things yourself, or wanting to be fixed. And that is where we need to change the narrative. That's where language is so important. And that's what we strive at Mindpiper, that mental health is not looked at from a stance of fixing, but supporting growth. It's not about me as a mental health professional taking you to a destination, but a journey that we are taking together, which can come from, again, building trust, having genuine personal connection. And we're constantly looking to expand language and make it more inclusive, where the person is not depressed or person is not anxious, but is struggling with these concerns. And finally, I think one large area that unfortunately we are grappling with is accessibility, right? There's a gap that exists between people who might be professionals and people who would be seeking support. And at Mindpiper, we are continuously looking at bridging this accessibility gap. This could be because of specific community, finances, language, but we are constantly looking at providing customized care to individuals and reaching out to them not only from an individual point of view, but from a group and a systemic point of view. So these are the three areas and the way that at Mindpiper we are navigating, maneuvering to provide mental health support.
Right, right. Okay, so you just said about this individual and group thing. So I have also noticed that Mindpiper extends mental health support to individuals, organizations, and communities. So, like, could you talk a bit more about it?
Absolutely. I think at Mindpiper we believe in a more holistic approach. So when you speak about these three, which is individuals, organization, and community, we don't see them as separate blocks, but we see them in an interplay where they are cohesive and they're dynamic, they're working together. With this holistic model of well being and mental health in mind, we aim to increase accessibility of mental health care. And at the core of this model is the individual, right? Which means that people with lived experiences of mental health concerns would be coming in for individualized therapy. However, not everyone might want a very customized, tailored approach. And at the outer level, we might have a lot of themes in common. For instance, in the context of the pandemic, you might be seeing aligned concerns of isolation or lack of connection, lack of social interaction. And individuals would be looking at group spaces rather than individual spaces to engage with this concern. That's where, from the core, we move to a group setup. And at the outer level, then we move towards community, or if I can reframe that, society at large, where there might be requirement for really, you know, putting in a seed of what really mental health is, having that sort of inception that this is what mental health can bring. This is what's important, perhaps, for each individual and their resilience or emotional well being. And at the outermost level, like I was saying, we look at building awareness around mental health with individuals who might not be as familiar with it. And this is where we bring in advocacy and bringing in the essence of what mental health support really looks like. Yeah.
Yes, if I may just add, because we've spoken about the holistic model, what we do at Mindpiper Archan is actually apply this holistic model. And if you can just visualize it with me, that at the centermost is that individual who we cater to, with who may be experiencing like a range of mental health concerns, and we cater to them through one-on-one individual counseling sessions, yeah, which right now obviously are happening virtually. And if you take a step to the the second circle, which is where we start collaborating and working with organizations and institutions, right? So what we uh, practice and at least try to do is collaborate with them to co-create a safe space for individuals. Let's say if you're collaborating with an institution and a college, so we invite all the stakeholders and we kind of brainstorm and collaborate on, okay, what are the values, what are the insights, and basically take into account their opinion on what would be best for the individuals or the students. And then cohesively, kind of collaborate, mix all of those to see what we can offer to meet the needs of the individuals. And lastly, I think just like Tamanna mentioned, on a more societal or a community level, uh, our programs, something that we recently initiated with other stakeholders involved in Delhi, which is called Mission Aid, which is we were offering psychosocial support to all the individuals who've recovered from COVID. To basically do a mental health check-in to see how they've been coping post-recovery. And again, this is something that we always try to do on a more community level, at large. And we've been collaborating with Rajasthan, Delhi, and again, for a more larger impact, which is the outermost level, the community. Hmm.
Right. So I feel like this group analysis, if I was feeling depressed or if I was feeling down, then if at a point I was not comfortable at a one-on-one conversation, if I was sitting in a group, maybe I would also feel better looking at other people who are sharing my thoughts and sharing my discomfort at some point, right? So I think this is also a very good way to share. And as you mentioned that there were COVID times. So acknowledging to that part, I would like to ask you that during this time we saw that there was an upsurge of mental health concerns last year. So obviously the pandemic was responsible for that. I believe Mindpiper has also seen a rise in the demand for therapeutic services. So what do you think led to it? Like, how did you deal with it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a very valid question because we did see an upsurge, and um, there were a lot of factors or a lot of common themes that we saw coming up. But I think if I could just talk about the most recurrent themes, Archan, they would have to be to begin with, uh, I think, fear, you know. And by fear, I mean anxiety, worry, stress around what's going to happen next, not knowing what is coming up now. And so there's a lot of uncertainty around it. And I think uncertainty is one word that is quite appropriate to pandemic and COVID-19, because it started off with, okay, what is COVID-19? Will I get it? Will I recover? Will there be a third wave? So there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the pandemic anyway. So I think the first thing that comes up for me would be fear. The second very, very, very common theme is loss. And loss, obviously, in the sense of loss of life, but also loss of time. I wanted to probably spend 2 years on a course that I couldn't. Loss of productivity. It's very tough to be productive when you're working remotely. Loss of motivation, loss of certainty, loss of routine. What time do you wake up, what time do you sleep? So there are a lot of concerns around loss as a concept in general. And I think something which was very, very common was that everybody was coming from a place of, okay, I want to make a difference, I want to help, I want to contribute. But it was quite overwhelming for us to even, watch the news and looking at those Instagram stories or WhatsApp forwards of, somebody needs an oxygen cylinder. And that's probably because we were all experiencing and responding to COVID in our own unique way. But we also realized that this is something that all of us are collectively going through. And so there was a shared feeling of, okay, this is what it may feel like. And so there was like this vicarious experience of loss, vicarious stress, and also obviously I think that goes without saying, a sense of isolation with lockdown, with quarantine. So I feel like, yeah, fear, loss, isolation were the most common themes that these are factors that actually led to upsurge in the number of uh, therapeutic services need for it.
And so, like, was there any addition to what you had to do? Like, there was a sudden upsurge, and was there a difference in treating the people? How you how you people tended to them?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Samuli, do you want to go first?
Yeah. I think definitely. I think it's also important to recognize that the way that you provide support
Hmm.
has also changed. It's something that's shifted for a lot of us, right? For instance, something that might be coming up quite a bit is space, right? Not everybody has the luxury to be sitting in their own home, having their own personal space, and engaging with a therapist online. Right? So, how do you navigate or how do you negotiate aspects of space? That was one concern. Suddenly, I'm no longer at a neutral space with a therapist, but I'm at home, which could be potentially, and I don't have a space of my own, which could potentially be distressing for people, right? So, how do you, I think what really works during this is understanding and finding a midway between the therapist and the individual who's stepping in. What works for you? And understanding that this is not just at individual's concern, but it's something that all of us are going through. Obviously, we have those technical concerns of your Wi-Fi not working and the network concerns, and that can also be disruptive, specifically when someone is talking about things that are really important for them. But again, I'd circle back to understanding, having that empathy, having patience, because it's potentially something that's out of our control. We are in a pandemic where things are out of our control. So how do we come to a midway, understand, and build in that much empathy, which can really seep into your therapeutic alliance?
Hmm.
Yeah, it's been, I think, a constant wheel of reinventing for us.
Yeah.
But what I'd really like to say is there's a flip side to what I just mentioned, which is that imagine, even in this pandemic, the amount of people who can now easily access mental health support, right? It can be on your mobile, it can be on your 4G, but the accessibility has actually expanded. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yes. So I think what I'd like to add to that is that this is for the first time, probably in history, where all of us are going through something common, which is also a way to connect and a way to empathize with people who are experiencing this, right? So I feel like that's also another aspect to look at how things have changed with respect to client therapist relationship. Yeah.
Right. So I would move on with the questions. And now again coming back to something which is like I noticed about Mindpiper only. So it states that one's experience with you guys will be rooted in four C's. So can you just elaborate it to us?
Of course. So the four C's are, I think, extremely valuable to us as a team, and also I feel like to a lot of our clients. And to begin with, I think the first C stands for connection. So, as we all understand, the client for us, at least in therapy, is the center, right? It's he or she is the center of that journey, and so it is our responsibility that we make the client feel heard, valued, and seen. And connection is something that we refer to as rapport. And the entire journey is built on that rapport between the client and the therapist. So one thing that Mindpiper does, and I feel which is extremely exclusive to our organization, is we have someone known as a care facilitator, Archan. So what we do is that we assign to every client a care facilitator whose task is basically to give that additional support outside of therapy, just to make the process of seeking help a bit more simple and less overwhelming. Because a lot of times, even before reaching the mental health professional, the process can be quite overwhelming. what do I have to do? What is therapy about? What are the next steps? There are a lot of questions, a lot of concerns around it. So the the role of a care facilitator really helps smoothens out that process for the client. So that is quite essential, and that is one of the many things that the care facilitator does in establishing connection between the client and the therapist. Yeah, the second C is the context. Now, I think this is extremely important. Uh, when we view an individual, when we understand an individual, it's crucial that we don't look at that person as an isolated person, but also in contrast to his background, his story, and his context. Where is he or she coming from? Right? So, asking that person, who are you, but also asking that person, what is your story? And that story is what will make my understanding of that individual complete and holistic. So additionally, what we try to do is at Mindpiper, help the clients work with a therapist who understands their context equally well. You know, the third C that we focus on is a very basic thing, which is concept. So we have a team of professionals who are from diverse schools of thoughts and approaches. So no one size fits all, right? So we have varied tools, techniques, and modalities that we can use with our clients. So we have an expressive arts-based therapist. We obviously also use talk therapy. We use metaphors. So there are different modalities. So what may work for one person may not work for the other. So we tend to focus a lot on concept in these diversity in techniques and modalities, which makes the process quite enriching. And the last C is convenience, which basically brings everything that I've just spoken of together. It ties everything together because convenience is, in a way, what Tamanna was talking about, accessibility. How convenient can we make it for them to access help? So we are quite flexible around, what are the timings of the session going to be like. The client can choose their therapist after reading their bios. And to some extent also, the cost involved in their sessions. So this is a value that we all hold as team members of Mindpiper, that financial restrictions should not be a reason why people can't seek help. So what we tend to do is again bring in the context in the picture, focus on where the client is coming from, check in with the client, understand the context, and then take it forward. What can the person afford? you know so these four things: connection, context, concept, and convenience, is what makes the entire process enriching as well as simple, less overwhelming for clients, I feel. Hmm.
Yes, I think this is very important and it's very good that Mindpiper thinks of the clients like this. So I think this is a very good approach towards the clients, mainly the context and the convenience part, because I really believe that the financial part of a therapy is something which keeps away people from it. So people at Mindpiper, you guys are looking to it in that way, it's really good. So I will move on to the next question. Now, I have also seen some of my friends who are suffering from such like bad days and they are having mental breakdowns. So, but at those points, I find myself I'm unable to help them. So, I believe many of our viewers will relate with this story as well. So, how do you guys suggest we extend support and provide some comfort to them?
Hmm. Yes, first of all, I think, Archon, that's a great question to ask, and it would be so great if everybody could ask that question. What can I do? And I have a very simple way of remembering what to do in certain situations like these where you want to offer support. And I'm going to remember Gandhi ji for a minute here and talk about his three Gandhi ji ke Deen Pandar, and talk about what he said. So, बुरा मत देखो, बुरा मत सुनो, और बुरा मत बोलो. Yeah. So, Pura Mat Dekho, taking that, drop the lens of judgment when talking to a friend, colleague, or any other individual who seems distressed. Because with judgment can come labeling, वो तो पागल है, सोता रहता है. All of these terms, they're coming from a place of judgment. And these labels that we put may very often isolate the individual and do more harm than good, you know. So I think the first step that we all can take is shed our judgments to begin with when we talk to them. The second thing that we can do is bura mat suno. So I think all human beings have a tendency to hear and not really listen. And this is what we need to kind of shift when we actually truly listen and really listen to what is it that they're trying to say and how are they really feeling, you know. So that does wonders, Archan. That does wonders. Just actively listening to what the person has to say, giving them that space. And the third thing is bura mat bolo, which is again boils back to judgment. It's so easy to call someone names, to label, to say, just go out and you'll be fine, and it's just in your head, it will be fine in a day or two, you know. This is not something that they want to listen. What they actually want to hear from you are some very basic things that are very underrated in today's time. Saying to a person, I'm there for you. You are not alone. It's okay if you don't want to talk, but I'm right here. You know, it's okay to not be okay. These simple lines can again do wonders, just create a sense of calm that it's okay and it will pass. There's somebody around. And
Hmm.
I think the last bit, although I'm quite aware that I'm saying this, but it's very important that all of us as individuals are also aware of our boundaries, be it coming from a place of a friend or a colleague or an acquaintance. Be aware that there is a boundary and there is only so much I can do to help. After that, I need to refer to a person who's trained in providing support. And I think that's quite crucial.
Hmm. Absolutely. I think if I can just add to what Agrima just mentioned, we all somewhere or the other have this sense of helping, caring for our friends, people who might mean a lot for us. But it's also to important to recognize, I think something that Agrima mentioned, boundaries, is also a way to support yourself and others, is referring or saying that, yes, I'm here for you. However, perhaps what might help even more is talking to or sitting down with a trained professional, because that is also an essence of you providing support to another individual while taking care of yourself as well.
Right. Thank you for the last bit, Tamanna, because that's a very important thing I feel from your perspective. Because, like, our audiences have listened, they know the stories from the client's perspective, but I don't really think and ever that anyone has like listened to your perspective, right? So I would like to ask you that how is it from your perspective? You are listening to so many stories every day, both of you. So does it impact your mental health at some point? That are you feeling down listening to those things every day, every day, every day?
Mm-hmm. That's a very important question, Arjun. I think the way that I'm looking at it is maybe I can talk about it as a mental health professional, but I can also talk about it as being a part of a team of psychologists. Um, I think it would impact anyone. Each of the narratives that you hear, each of the stories that you hear, somewhere stay with you. Right? So, as a professional, as a mental health professional, it's quite important to recognize that. If you're in a session, And then you've seen that this narrative is coming up, perhaps recognizing how it's impacting you. Something that helps further in that reflection is supervision, which means that as a therapist, you are with a qualified supervisor who might be helping you reflect and process uh, what these themes are, how you're feeling about it, and how you can integrate this back into the therapy space. Uh, Constant supervision and therapy is very important for self growth and development for a professional. And this is something that's really integrated in our training as well. No matter what universities we go to or where we do our trainings, it's always something that's recommended strongly, because that's how you are also setting boundaries, you're taking care of yourself. Because once you take care of yourself, that's the quality of support that you might be extending will also come from there. And I think what I just mentioned in the first part was boundaries, so setting boundaries. With the second wave, like you just mentioned, Arjun, absolutely, there was an upsurge. Suddenly, a lot of people coming forward, requiring some sort of communication support. And then, as a professional, you need to see what are you feeling about it, because the pandemic has also impacted you. When do you need to take a break? What is your work life integration? Because that's important, that's key to the quality that you're providing or the quality that you're engaging with in terms of mental health support. So, work life integration, knowing that I can do this, but this is where I pause and this is where I take care of myself is extremely important. Sometimes I feel, you hear this word self care so much, like self care, do this and engage in self care, do this and you'll be engaging in self care. But self care is so crucial, not only for a therapist, but also for each one of us. It looks differently. Perhaps for you, it might be mindful breathing. Perhaps for someone else, it might be art. For someone else, it might just be a pet, you know, sitting with a pet. But it looks differently, but it's important to recognize what it means for you. And if I talk about the team, Archon, I think within a team of psychologists, what's really key at Mindpiper is open and transparent communication amongst each other, always making it known that we are here for each other and for supporting each other. Because we are, again, as I mentioned, going through this together. It might be impacting us differently, but to know that there is a communication channel, there is transparency, always helps for people to reach out or seek or express any sort of support. Also, reinventing, knowing that there's a lockdown, knowing that we are at a pandemic, how do we interact? How do we communicate through those remote working channels? How do we also now integrate times where we all can also have fun? Because when you're working in person, taking a 10-minute break and going and having tea comes very naturally. But what about in remote times? Maybe we need to plug in that really easygoing, fun, joyous part that we are used to with that in-person communication. So really integrating that mindfully and checking in, clarity of expectations, support. And at Mindpiper, every morning we do a check-in before we set out to our day. So meeting together, knowing how each of us is feeling, what is it that we're going to do, and then moving forward. So those are just some uh, bits that we do as professionals and as a team together at Mindpiper to take care of ourselves.
That's great. That's great. I hope that you guys will continue that and stay happy in your own lives and stay healthy, more importantly. So, with that, I would like to bring this interview to an end. I would like to thank Ms. Tamanna, Ms. Agrima, not only for the information rich interview, but also for their commitment and contribution towards advocating for and extending mental health support to the individuals. Will you guys like to say something?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I think what I'd like to leave with a message is a person who is experiencing depression. is very different from a depressed person, you know. In the former, we are experiencing a problem. In the latter, we are the problem. And I'm bringing this up because language is a very, very powerful tool, as we have seen and witnessed. Only if we can be a bit mindful while using it is, in our daily lives. I think that's something that I am leaving you all, and also a thought that I'm leaving with.
Hmm. Yeah,
That is
absolutely. I think, yeah, adding to what Agrima is saying, I think one thought that I would really want all of us to sort of consider or relook at is that mental health is a continuum. We often wait quite patiently, if I may say so, till we reach a point where mental health care is imperative. It's almost like when we are close to a flood situation, that's when we'll say, okay, now's the time. But it's also not only about depression or anxiety or this part of the, although I'm just naming it, this part of the continuum, but it's also the finer nuances. Maybe the day when you were feeling very low, maybe that day when you had constant conflict at work and you're feeling demotivated. It's those finer nuances. That is where we need to integrate that support, mental health support is natural. It's for my growth, resilience, and development. And I think I just want to add that thank you so much, Arjun, for also engaging and interacting with us on this forum, because this is also extremely imperative in advocating and building awareness for what mental health is.
Thank you
Yes.
so much, both of you. So, guys,
Thank you.
my audiences, please feel free to contact Mindpiper at support@mindpiper.org if you require any support with mental health care. So, thank you for today. See you all next time at Commondove. Thank you.
Bye.